What's up, my precious pack, and welcome back once again to VEGA Conflict. I'm going to go over the special events prize list, give a prize recommendation, as well as the recommended targets based on what you're going to be farming for. And the goal for this will only be to collect one ship in specific, and this is for anybody. Your goal is to collect the Sovereign Carrier Blueprint. The Cyclotron beams pick up 6 level 1s, and an on-guard overdrive generator. Now, I don't see Zephyr thrusters anywhere, and that's going to be required for the build that you're going to be using for it. But that's about all you're going to need. The recommended targets are actually going to be... Give me a second and I'll show you all. Okay, let's take a look here. Skip all that garbage. For any of you who don't mind spending coins for some reason, you can pick on the Altarian Blitz fleets. I'd recommend picking on the Deceivers because they're the easiest target out of them all. If you have any type of carrier, such as a Paladin or at least a Dominion, you can just turn and run away from the fleet the entire fight and pick them apart. Paladin would be the more recommended there. As for other standard targets, again, for anyone who doesn't have Altarian technology, I wouldn't recommend fighting the Altarians. I would recommend fighting targets that are within your own criteria. So if you have Axis or Xeno, I'd recommend picking on the Axis Deceivers. I would recommend taking on at least the level 70 if possible. However, in comparison, I've always found that the Deceiver 70 and the Blitz 65 are around the same difficulty, even though the Blitz 65 gives you 22,500 intel, whereas the 70 only gives you 10,000. You also get armor for your base. Well, it's not really that needed. No way, that's just a standard armor. You don't need it at all. Punishers, well, I can't say they're debatable because I use them as well, so any of them that you decide to actually go through, if you start taking on the Deceivers, start with the level 50 and go through the 70 and just keep cycling through until you get everything to produce everything up to a Mark IV if you're using Xeno, because that will be beneficial to you. For higher levels, they're just aiming for any other number of things, or if you're working with the current tier and you're working on picking up your carrier, so you have Altarian ships already, you're going to want to start with the Altarian Mothership level 90 and start picking up those Carrier Mark IIs, the Cruiser Mark IVs, the Mark VI Elite Fragments, as well as the Epsilon Echo Cannons. And you just gradually increase it as you go up, because you need to pick up the Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV, and Mark V boxes. So you're going to go 90, 110, 120 as you slowly progress. But that's it for the recommended price targets. Let's actually take a look at what the level 90... Actually, I should be doing level 110 because mine's only a Mark II Sovereign, so even I still have to upgrade mine. However, in the time that it takes for you to do all of that, you'll be able to farm up more than enough elite credits to produce several elite upgrade credits for your Sovereign. Funny, right? Now, let's go ahead and let's go find 110 and let's pick on it. Okay, welcome back everybody. Let's go ahead and let's jump right into the fight. Wasn't that a little bit buggy? Anybody else see that? That looks like a little bit of visual glitch there. It was chaining through the Wraith. It was nowhere near the other ships and destroying and damaging the others that were well behind it. Oh yes, and I'll talk about the fittings for my ships towards the end of this fight, because as a few of you just saw, their ships can't fight back. for quite a while. And that is for a very good reason. Yeah, as a few of you can see, that race is disabling every single weapon system on board that little itty bitty bastion at the same time it's locking it down, and that's because of what I have fitted on it. It's actually using the arrestor beam because of the long firing cycle, and it's specifically to shut down heavy attack ships. So if they do high damage, target them with your wraith, and I'll explain exactly why the fitting works so well as show it and the behemoth off in a fight. I need to get this bastion out of there because it's taking a little bit more of a beating than I want. Come on, get your overdrive to activate. Come on. There we go. Now, a few of you may be wondering, why is the overdrive working to a percentage against the Altarian mothership? Again, it's still disabling weapon systems, but it's not disabling all of them. Okay, when did... And you lost already. Once your shield goes down, you're not going to be able to do much of anything with your guy. And there you go. You don't get a fight back now. And fire again. Disable its weapons. That's it. And as you notice towards the end there, they actually still fire. And that's actually a funny little bit. It never actively disrupts the actual firing cycle, so it doesn't completely stop them. It just disrupts them while it's actively hitting them. And that's what the overdrive does of the race. And it took me a little while to figure it out while I was reading and playing through the game, and it's something that occurred to me that the Coaling Overdrive is only active while it's hitting an enemy. Fire Disruption, it's only for the initial hit so it can disrupt them, but this is what it does. The disruption reduces the reload time and stuff like that, so long as they're actively being hit. So if you hit an enemy ship, it's going to take them quite a while to be able to get their weapons back online, and it's also going to increase its own weapon speed. So, you know how a certain weapon is far too slow to be viable on other ships? Well, I'm actually going to make a joke about it here. The reason that fitting works so well is due to the long firing cycle of the arrestor beam, and it also has the advantage of locking down an enemy ship, reducing the amount of damage output they have by 50%, and a little bit more. But on top of that, we have a certain garbage weapon that is far too slow on other ships to be viable, but on the Wraith it works just fine because it can hit the vast majority of the time. That's due to the speed at which it hits. And that is this little guy, the Atomic Driver. By default, it only has 850 meters per second. Even if you fully equip it, set it all up, it's still going to take a while to hit the target. And let's just make a little joke about this. The Atomic Driver's projectile is so slow that it makes a snail look like it has rocket engines. It is so slow that it makes a snail look like it's a souped-up sports car. Fastest of the fast in comparison. Now, exactly why is it better on the Wraith than on a destroyer? Well, for one, when the Wraith's overdrive activates, you get the speed bonus. at 50%. Now, I do not know right now if it increases the speed bonus based upon high damage factors such as... No, not high damage factors, high speed factors. So if you add anything to increase the weapon speed, if it'll also increase the speed when it's boosted, because if so, then it would become a very viable weapon for race. But I'd have to test it out, and I'll probably do a test fitting for it later. Second, the race fitting, and there is two of them that I have. The first one being the primary, and it is a few blight weapons, an arrestor beam, the harmonic beam capacitor, chase thrusters, all level 1 armor, all level 2, and a little bit of level 3 of the ablative if you have enough. Secondary fitting is effectively the same, but it's from Mark IV, and it just replaces one single slot, and it fits perfectly fine, as well as having the energy resistors. As you can see, I took a little bit more damage than I wanted to, but that doesn't really matter because the main fleet I'm going to be using is going to be this one later on. And a few of you may be wondering why, well, I'll let you find that out later. So the firing disruption, it works differently than how I just said it, and it occurred to me that I just misrepresented it, and that is the fact that it actively slows down their weapons for a set duration of time, and the long time frame that you hit them for, when your weapon stops firing, that's when their debuff time begins. The debuff time begins when your weapon fires, but when it ends, that's where it actually starts to count down. By the time that it typically is going to end, you've already fired again and reset it, so that they're constantly losing damage per second. You can never truly lock down an enemy ship's weapons and make it so that they can't deal damage, because that wouldn't be very balanced, and even Kixeye knew that from what it seems. So in turn, the Wraith is very, very good at what it does because of its overdrive, and that is the fact that it can lock an enemy weapons down by effectively reducing their damage per second by 50%. However, I have noticed, as you probably noticed a few times as well, that for some reason, every now and then when you have multiple different weapons on the Wraith, it seems to double stack the culling effect, as you probably saw. When the first initial set of weapons went off after the overdrive activated against the mothership, it slowed its weapons down. That's what it did. It started firing more slowly, dishing out less damage. When the arrestor beam hit it, it seemed to slow the weapons down another 50%, which by now was already down to 50%, so it's down to 25%. It may be incorrect, or it may be a visual glitch, and it may actually still be firing at the standard rate, and it's just me being a little bit crazy. But the weapon speed makes the most valuable weapon, well, the most garbage weapon, viable for a ship that it should never have been equipped on, and that is the atomic driver. Now, weight-wise, you're never going to be able to fit enough of them on the ship, but it doesn't really matter. Especially when you burst AoE out an enemy group, lock their weapons down, and that's it. And this race is the lockdown fitting that I have, and it's specifically meant to disable or slow down enemy weapon systems for as long as possible, as well as disable their engines and lock them in place for another ship to hit them. So if you actually want to use the atomic drivers on destroyers or something else that's behind the Wraith, the atomic drivers will be more useful because the Wraith will be effectively holding the target still so that they can't dodge the attacks, while the ships behind it pile on the damage. And the same works with this level 101 fleet. I used this earlier, and the only reason they took so much damage was because the Dreadnought, again, it sucks, but right now I've split my forces into two separate tiers. Need to bring the other Wraith back out at some point. No, the other Bastion. But what I did was I was attacking the 110s earlier. The Overseers started spawning. I've already taken out a few of them, and as you can see, the repair time isn't that bad on the fleet. But I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. If you have a similar fitting to the Wraith, but have different experience, let me know in the comment section below. If you have a better fitting, or a possibly longer firing beam weapon to just do as much disruption as you can on the enemy ship before you actually disable the ship and destroy it, and disabling not in terms of actually disabling weapons, just slowing them down. And this is something that I commonly misrepresent, is the Wraith's overdrive. It doesn't actively disrupt weapons, as it says, because the disruption effect, as we see it, just slows them down. They continue firing, but at half the speed. And it doesn't stack with multiple wraiths. But with the arrestor beam setup, so far it's worked extremely well for me to actively keep the enemies from dealing full damage, and in all the high-level event targets, I've been able to reduce my damage in half by physically just locking them down, whilst picking them apart from a longer range. Now, this tactic does work on the behemoths in the 110 as well, because you can't slow it down, but you're actively disrupting its weapons so that it's firing at half the speed, so you're effectively reducing half its damage per second, which is actually very good. And I'll talk more about the Overseer 110s in a video later on when I take a few more of them apart. But that's going to be it, everybody. What are your thoughts on the race builds so far for what people have been using? Do you have one similar to I have? Do you have one that's better? Do you have one that's worse? Also, if you're looking for a different set of targets or anything like that, base the targets around what you have. If you use battleships, I'd recommend you take on the fleets that's recommended you fight with battleships and things like that. But remember, always try and use the carrier to kite, and only use your battleship group or your cruisers or anything like that if the enemy gets too close. In the vast majority of Altarian fleets, well, that's not going to be very often, because most of the time they even outrange your carrier, so there's not much you can do there. But if you liked the video, feel free to leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, feel free to subscribe, browse the channel. There's plenty of content for everybody on the channel. And as always, everybody, be safe out there in the void, and I'll see you later.